Hey, it's me again. Hey, I just wanted to add a few more things to your reading to help supplement it and go over a few key points in the PowerPoint. I'll try not to take too long because I'm sure you don't want to hear my voice drone on for hours and hours, and that's not my goal either. Because ironically, I get tired of hearing my own voice too. But I just wanted to go over a few things in the PowerPoint, highlight a couple of things to add a little bit more context to what you're reading and what you're seeing in the PowerPoint. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be looking at my computer here. So if you see me looking away, it's not because I'm not trying to pay attention to everybody. It's just really because I really want to make sure that I'm looking at everything on the PowerPoint, making sure I cover the most important points. So if you look at the PowerPoint just by itself, it might look a little bit incomplete or vague. And that's fine. It's kind of designed that way. When I'm in class, actually, I don't write everything out on the PowerPoint because my students will sit there and they'll be taking notes forever. So I try to keep the PowerPoint short and to the point, and that allows me to add examples and explain concepts a little bit better so that they can grasp them. So that's what we're going to do. We'll take a few minutes and just look over a couple things and highlight them. You still want to read the textbook. You still want to do your readings, and you want to look over the PowerPoints. And this is just another guide to kind of help you get a better understanding of what's going on in communication. So communication. In the first slide, I talk about what communication is. And first thing I say is communication is about you. Okay, so unlike other disciplines that may not have a lot to do with you, maybe you're taking a chemistry class, maybe you're taking a statistics class, and you may not feel like it has a lot to do with you. Communication is really about you. And it's about not just helping you check a box on your check sheet and graduate, but what communication is about is for you growing on an intellectual and interpersonal level to make sure that not only you're successful professionally, but you're also successful personally, and that your relationships are healthy because you've learned how to communicate effectively. So this really centers around what you do. And what you're going to find in this discipline in communication is a marriage between both sociology and psychology, and it blends together both those disciplines, and you kind of look what the communicative process is a result of how we're socialized and how our mind operates and how we're cognitively constructed. So how that plays out and how we receive and send messages is all about communication. And communication is about the skills you bring. So I don't know how old all my students are, how old my class is here, but let's say if you're 25 years old, what I say is you bring 25 years of experience with you. If you're 31 years old, you're bringing 31 years of experience with you to this class. If you're 18 years old, you're bringing 18 years of experience. And what I mean by that is when you're a baby, think about it. You came out the womb, you were hungry, what did you do? You cried. Babies can smile as early as 2 to 3 weeks. You're 2 to 3 weeks old, so they're immediately able to express joy and happiness. They can express when they're sad. They can express when they're frustrated. They can express when they're content. So you've been communicating basically since the day you came out the womb. So you bring with you skills and competencies and expertise that you may not know that you actually had. So during our group projects, during some of the discussion, I really want you guys to feel encouraged and enlightened that you guys can share and open up, because it's not like I know all the answers and I'm dumping all my wisdom on you. You guys are actually bringing some things to the table as well, and I want you guys to be confident to share your perspectives because it actually matters. Communication is inescapable. That's another important thing about communication is you can't get out of it. And there's a double negative that's in the PowerPoint. It says you cannot not communicate, okay? Which means that you're always on. You're always communicating. I had a student a few years ago sit there and say to me, well, Professor Chris, I don't think that's true. What if I'm asleep? I'm not communicating when I'm asleep. And I said, okay, let's think about communication, and also let's factor in context, right? What happens if you were to fall asleep right now in this class? What are you communicating to me? Some other students chimed in and said, well, it would communicate that he's not interested. It would communicate that he might be bored, that he doesn't care about your class, or that he's lazy. And I said, you see, this is how communication in various different contexts can mean different things. And so whether it's something as simple as you leaning back in your chair, maybe it's the way you're dressed, maybe it's your ethnicity, your race, your culture, um, how people think you, your attractiveness, your weight. All these things factor into how people see you. But more importantly, these things that you carry with you send messages out to people without you ever opening your mouth. The way you dress sends messages to people that indicate something before you ever open your mouth. Think about that when somebody wears expensive clothes and people think they're rich. Think about it if a guy dresses in a muscle t-shirt. Think about it if a female wears some short shorts. There are messages and meanings that are being sent out. Whether they're true or not, we can't necessarily verify. But what we can know is we can speak to the reality of how those messages can send certain messages to people before they can even actually say words. So communication is much more dynamic, fluid than what most people anticipate, because you can send messages whether you're talking or whether you're just being quiet. And then communications is also about culture, context, identity, and relationships. And we'll get into that too. One of the, if you looked at your, I'm trying to think here. If you looked at your discussion posts, one of the things, the videos I had you watch was about communication in social media context and how that's affecting face-to-face communication and what are some of the implications of that. So that's something to really think about. Another thing is communication's evolving. So how we communicate today in 2015 is vastly different than how we communicated back in 1995, right? When I was in high school in the 90s, I'm dating myself a little bit, we didn't have cell phones. And I was explaining to my class today, think about how that's changed how we communicate in social sexual situations, for example. If a kid in the 90s, right, during my time in high school, wanted to say something or do something, they would have to say it face to face. Nowadays, and engage the opposite sex in maybe a social sexual message or something like that, they'd have to do it face to face. Think about it today with how young people use technology. A lot of these social sexual messages aren't being sent face to face. They're being sent via Snapchat, being sent versus picture messages, text messages, picture attachments. And you have young people who are engaging in these relationships, some of them very sexual, but a lot of times they, are doing it through a digital context. And it's like they almost are hiding behind the anonymity of, well, it's just a picture. It's just a text message. And so if you've known young people, then you might be able to identify that there's somebody who has gotten in trouble, right? I've had friends of family who's gotten in trouble because the kid is doing things that you wonder, like, wow, how are they able to do that? Why are they doing it? And it's because digital communication has changed how young people are communicating. Look at blogs, for example, or look at YouTube. If you ever see how people comment and leave threads, you can see that people start getting into arguments on Facebook or on YouTube or on any different type of blogs. And it's not too long before they start using racial slurs. They start saying things that are highly offensive, sexually demeaning to each other really quickly over stuff that's not even about that. And so I always wonder, how did people get there so quick? And I think that really speaks a lot to how people change when they enter this digital context, how it emboldens people to behave in ways that they normally would not behave. And so that's something that we're going to look at as we get in deeper into communication and context and the evolution of how we communicate and the role of technology and how we respond to other people. I just want to hit you with the definitions of communication. I know you're like, what is communication about? Well, it's in your textbook, but I'll just talk about it. So communication is the process of using signs, symbols, and behaviors to exchange information and generate meaning. And there's really 5 needs that communication addresses. It's physical needs, right? If we need something physically, if we need medicine, even if we need a glass of water, we're going to sit there and say, hey, can I have a glass of water? I'm very thirsty. It addresses relational needs. It fills identity needs. So we communicate with other people to form our own identity. If you ever talked to a kid, before, or had to reprimand a kid, what do you say? We don't do that in this house, right? I have a nephew who does things that might be seen as misbehavior, and I'll sit there and say, hey, 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 we don't throw things. I use that communication to inform him of who he is, and I put myself with him. We don't act like that. We don't behave like that. And I'm using communication to shape his identity of what he can do and what's unacceptable for him to do. So something to think about. Communication meets spiritual needs, and lastly, communication serves instrumental needs. And if you want to know more about that, pick up the book, and it goes into details and provides some really great examples of that. But let's just move on a little bit. So there's 3 models of communication that the book really highlights, and your first discussion post, part A, goes into that. And so when you're looking at your discussion post, it talks about linear models of communication, and that's really basic. Right now, how I'm engaging with you is very linear, right? I'm sending a message to you, communicating, but you can't communicate back to this video, right? You can't just sit there in the middle of the video, talk to me real time. And the same thing we see in TV, right? They communicate to you in TV. You can't really have a fluid conversation with it. They're talking to you, you're receiving the message. And that's basically the gist of linear communication. So it's communication in one way from a sender, like I'm sending it to you, to a receiver. And what I do is I think of the message, I encode it, try to find the best way I want to say it and package it, and then I send it to you guys, and then you interpret the message, and you can sit there and say, wow, he's a very articulate teacher. You can sit there and say, man, this teacher doesn't know anything, right? He offended me already. So I don't know how I could have done that, but I'm just saying, you can interpret messages any way that you see fit. And so, something to think about. So the receiver is the person who receives a message and interprets it. And encoding process is the person who's sending the message. I encode the message and I send it to the receiver, and the receiver decodes it. And the channel is the method in which I use this in the message. So I could have typed this conversation up with you guys and sent it out on Canvas, or I could have done a video. All right, I could have sent you guys letters. All right, so there's a lot of things I could have done to send this message to you. This is the format that works best for me, and so this is the channel that I'm using to communicate with you. All right, so moving on. Next is the interactive model of communication. And the interactive communication is a little bit more robust, because what we're seeing is we have a source and we also have a receiver. And the messages are being actually sent not just one way, but it's actually being sent another way. So it's two-way communication. I can actually, as a source, say something to you, right, in this type of model. And in an interactive model of communication, you can actually say something back to me and provide me feedback. Like, hey, do you want to go grab Chinese food? And you can sit there and say back to me, not tonight. I really don't feel like having Chinese food. I'd rather have Mexican food. Okay? So you're providing me feedback based on what I communicated to you. And that's the difference of the interactive model. Where the linear, I could sit there and say, hey, we're going to go have Mexican food, and it's one way, and you can't say anything back. The interactive model allows you to provide feedback. And there's another element to it as well. It actually includes noise. So what is noise? Noise is anything that interferes with the message, okay? So it could be the phone ringing. It could be somebody doing construction or landscaping outside. One of the things that I know that I experience in my own personal life, as far as noise is concerned, is I like sports. I'm a big football fan, go Cardinals. And I love watching football. I can lay on the couch and watch my Sun Devils or watch my Cardinals. It's a perfect way to spend a weekend. But, unfortunately, when you're married like I am, my wife likes to talk to me and interrupt me while watching my football games. And she will want to talk about something deep or share and open up, and it's the fourth quarter and I don't really want to hear it. I realize instead of pretending like I'm listening to her, what I have to do is mute the TV set and get rid of all the noise, or either turn off the TV set completely so I can focus on her. And so noise gets in the way of me listening to her message. So in this week's discussion post, there's a video, part A, when you watch it. And one of the questions I think I asked you is to think of an example in which noise interferes with the message you're trying to